Thanks for staying with us here on the AM show. Now, as part of our Defend Media Freedom campaign, we'll have a one-on-one interaction with Kojo Yankah, former Member of Parliament. He also served as a Minister of States. He's a founder and president of the African University College of Communications and also a former editor at the Daily Graphic. Also authored a book, From Jamestown to Jamestown, Letters to an African Child, recently published by the Haberi Africa Incorporated. He's been speaking to Kojo Yankah. Here's their conversation.
In Virginia, in the United States, there is a town called Jamestown. And of course, that brings back memories of our very own Jamestown on the coast here in Accra. How are the two connected? Well, somebody has taken the pains to connect them through a very creatively written book, using the literary device of letters to communicate the history of the African people, particularly the history that perhaps forces may have worked together to erase. Kojo Yankah, prolific writer and a well-known name and face on the Ghanaian media landscape, has done it again in his 10th book, From Jamestown to Jamestown, Letters to an African Child. I have the privilege of meeting him for the very first time today and learning a bit about this book, his other work, and indeed his life, which has led him to this accomplishment. Mr. Yankah, it's a true pleasure. Thank you very much for having us.
Nice meeting you.
You have a lovely home.
Thank you.
And you have an amazing book. I've not yet completed this book, but all those who have speak highly of it. And it appears you've done something which needed to be done. You've told a story that is fast getting covered, the African story. First, let's explore that. Why did you feel it was important to bring out this submerging story?
I think that it's a question of time, and probably its time has come, because the genesis of this book really starts 25 years ago. But before that, my own relationship with the diaspora was forcing me to find out more about those that left the shores of Africa and went to the diaspora, whether it's in the Americas or the Caribbean or in South America. I've been dealing with a lot of them in the past. I mean, I go to Brazil, my host takes me to church just to show me what happens in churches, and the blacks sit at the back. They are not supposed to sit in the front.
How long ago was this?
This was in the 90s. And then also, you get to some of the countries, even including Brazil, where you can decide to, I don't know whether the situation has changed, but you can decide when you are filling an official form to say you are white, even though you are black or you are what they call colored, because you get the privileges that go with being white. So if you are a teacher and you fill a form to say you are white, you get the privileges of a white. If you are black, you get less salary. See, so some of these have gone on throughout South America, throughout the Caribbean, and even in Mexico. Few people know that in the 15th century and 16th century, a lot of blacks went into Mexico. Today, some of the Mexicans cannot even remember that their ancestors were black. But the point is that there has been a deliberate effort to keep blacks down wherever they have been, even in America, even in Europe, even. So there has been a need for some awakening among people of the black color, you know, like Marcus Garvey said, it is not a badge of shame. So it is for us, and they have played their role, and several agitations have gone on. But I think it is time, particularly because in the 60s, when Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and others were alive and they kept the fire alive, it was on. But soon after Africans got independent, the link between the Africans and the people in the diaspora virtually was broken. And we haven't had many of them coming to Ghana, like we had W.E.B. Du Bois, we had George Padmore, we had Maya Angelou, and a whole lot living in Ghana.
Yeah.
But we broke that, particularly after Nkrumah's departure. So, as time went on, you found that the situation of blacks was not getting better. So, it was my part of my own personal assignment to really look at what was responsible for it and what we can do. So, being chairman of PANAFEST, I got the opportunity to even do more interaction with people of the diaspora. I travel around the world. And on one occasion in 1994, I was invited to this celebration, no, I don't call it celebration, commemoration of the 375th anniversary of the arrival of the first 20 Africans in America to this town called Jamestown. And the night before, there had been a symposium at the University of Hampton. And as I sat through, and they were talking about the arrival of first of the English colonists who came to settle in Jamestown. And then, after some time, when they really wanted to settle, which is really the beginning of the making of Black America, they also decided that their plantations needed more laborers. So they needed more people to be brought from Africa. Now, yes, I heard this story, particularly in depth, but the point is that those that were telling the story, these are American black professors, did not even know what happened on this side. So we had a situation where they kept talking about Jamestown. So along the line, I asked this professor, do you know there's a Jamestown in Ghana? I said, no. Is there a Jamestown? I said, yeah, there is. To tell the truth, I myself did not even know that Jamestown in Accra was also a slave post. We had always been looking at Cape Coast, Elmina, and the central region and part of western region. But Accra, I knew it was a port, but it didn't really occur to me. So my curiosity was aroused. When I came back, I started asking a lot of questions. I was in government then. I didn't have too much time to do a lot of investigation, but after I left government, I thought I should go back to it, particularly after I produced a few books after retiring from government. And Jamestown Cafe came around, and hanging around, historian Amate, near Amate Fuel, and others kept telling the story of Jamestown, and I was taking notes, and I said, this is the time to start calculating and putting things together. So that was about 5 years ago. So, having heard so much from Jamestown, I was shown the Jamestown prison was the fort. Then, even, it was getting more interesting. Because I said, okay. So I went back to Jamestown, Virginia, to do some more research on my own, on 2 occasions. I went to the museum, and it's not a big, huge museum, and very little really is told about the blacks, but a lot more about the whites who came from the UK and settled there, and their dealings with the Indians who were originally there, and how they moved out the Indians and took over the place, and the blacks who arrived and were bought by slave masters and had to work in the fields. But beyond that, I got more information, particularly about the rebellions and the revolts that went on in various plantations So it was telling a lot of things. And one guy invited me to go to the Turner plantations. The Turner place is about 100 acres big, and Turner was the guy who, a black slave, who even was trained to become a Baptist minister. And then one night, he dreamt, or he had a vision, that blacks had to liberate themselves. He organized a few of his men and decided to just eliminate the whites, their white masters. It was a huge rebellion in America, and Nat Turner and his group, of course, they were overcome because a whole lot of white masters had weapons and guns, and they overcame. But it was symbolic because that really was the trigger for the American Civil War. So you find that the blacks played a lot of role, you know, in the making of America. So if on the backs of blacks, the Civil War has been fought and America is united today, there must be more behind it. So I went deeper and deeper. I bought about 100 books.
Wow.
And a lot of research has been done. Some by, you know, black American professors who really had also been told lies in the past about themselves. They had done more research. And I found more work also written by some South American professors and even African. Sheikh Anta Diop is right next door in Senegal. A very celebrated historian, and he has so much information. But then I said to myself, so what was it all about African civilization? Yes, we had a civilization which were never taught in school, because our history classes started from the arrival of the Europeans. As if before that we didn't have any history.
There is the assumption that we were all savages.
We're all savages, you know,
Right.
and no, my research proved otherwise. And then, of course, a lot of publications started coming out that the origin of world civilization was in Africa, and that the origin of man was in Africa. The Chinese professors proved it in all their researches. The British proved that the first British was black. So all the DNAs were showing. I said, so why have they hidden all this from us? So a lot of my research pointed to the fact that this was a deliberate programming to just keep blacks inferior. And that's why the lack of confidence. It is a program everywhere in the world that you have gone. If you really travel around, you realize that, no, we are suffering the same fate. Even though people move to America, Ghanaians or Africans move. The relationship between them and African Americans is no good, because they don't understand each other. They even suspect each other, and they don't get on. Very few Africans get on with African Americans in America itself.
Permit me to ask this, you're a Pan-Africanist, and there is very often amongst Pan-Africanists a very clear message or a clear state of mind that where we are today was caused by the oppression of others, of whites. I hear this, and I can see the evidence of what whites did to our race. But I also wonder, must the solution come from them?
No.
You know, at the moment, we are the continent that has the most resources, has the youngest population. We have everything going for us. Yet we keep saying that we are where we are because of someone else. What is our own role here in breaking free of this?
Yes, that's a very valid question. I do not subscribe to the view that they should therefore come and liberate us. It is our own self-consciousness. First would be, we should know what happened. I do not like the position where people say, oh, forget about slavery, it's all past and gone. No. If we had known the depth to which human beings were made inhuman, it became like beasts. If you really know how people survived through all these, terrible conditions, if we get to know that it is our minds that they were dealing with, we were, our culture was taken away from us. People were not supposed even to sing their home songs. People were not supposed to drum. So you took the humanity out of the human beings. Of course, there's question about reparation and so on, but that is another matter. My point here, and which is what occasioned the writing of this book, is bring the awareness out. People don't know.
Who is stifling that information today, in today's world? Who are the people who are working together to ensure that the truth is not known?
I think that time is past, because now we've got to a stage where a lot of researches and books that were written and were hidden in the past are coming out. That is the beauty of the now, that technology has made it possible for you to search and go to books. Recently, I just got a book from Colin Palmer, wrote this book several years ago about blacks that went to Mexico. Even American professors and some of the professors in Ghana, elsewhere, didn't know it existed. So now they are all coming out. Ibn Battuta was, a great historian, a researcher, an explorer. He has so much information. And I have mentioned Sheikh Anta Diop. I mean, what he has done about African civilization. And just next door, Africans themselves, we have had even a problem with ourselves. We don't travel in Africa. We travel in Europe. We travel in America. So we don't know. I'm not sure how many professors in Ghana have gone to Senegal to go to the research institute of Sheikh Anta Diop. All our history is there. And we were not taught. I don't think you were taught. And so now it's all coming out. So I won't say that anybody consciously, but the time has come. That's why I kept saying, the time has come now for us to know. Who knew? Whoever published that the DNA showed that the first British man was black? It's only recent. The Guardian published it only about 3-4 years ago. And again, the Chinese also published. So all those are now coming out. There were people who thought that the pyramids of Egypt were built by white people. And see, because they wondered about the architecture. Now it's very clear that the pyramids were under the kings, the pharaonic kings, under their own leadership, and the kind of technology that Africa had those days, long before Christ. Before the Greeks invaded and took away the civilization and, colonized some of it and took some of the wisdom that our people had before the Romans. So a lot of these, what we call Western philosophers, all studied in Africa. We never knew. So we just quote them and we think that they are the original. They are not the original.
Are we partly to blame the fact that we're so terrible at keeping records as a continent?
Yeah, I've heard that before. But the point is that some books were burnt, some were destroyed. See, we have it's a very sad history. When they invaded, when the Greeks invaded, Egypt and that side in Ethiopia, all those, they just burnt them. So it's only a few books that were left. Now people are going back to find that some of the books still exist. Some had to be translated into English from other languages. So it's now emerging. So that idea that, Africans, they don't like writing, if you want to hide anything, hide it, I think it was created just to fit into a certain mode. So we have a lot of quotations. from white people who say that, oh, the African is an ass. He doesn't, understand anything. So don't teach him mathematics. This was in South Africa part of the apartheid lessons they were teaching in school. So and if you look at the history of America, almost all the presidents, except John Kennedy, were saying that the slaves are not people, the Africans are not people to live with, to allow to live in a civilized world with the white. So it's the Europeans who went to America who decided that, no, these guys, we cannot live with them. But we didn't find the consciousness early enough. But again, the mistaken part of that is that we had people like Marcus Garvey and who long ago even were thinking about, the Back to Africa movement, where President Monroe said, listen, let the blacks go back to Africa. That's how we founded Liberia. So really, they didn't want to live side by side with Africans. But now I'm saying that it's time. Consciousness is here, so we must work with that kind of consciousness. But we need all the information to arouse the interest of particularly the youth. Because if they get to know, I think they will help to solve this problem.
Indeed. Now, it's the year of return here in Ghana. There's a conscious effort by government to place Ghana as a destination once again, and to invite not just people from any other parts of the world, but people who originally are from Africa, to come back and learn about our history. Do you find that timing fortuitous? Was it part of the reason why you perhaps thought it's time for this book to come out?
I think part of the reason was that I wanted this book to come out before the 400th anniversary. I told you I attended this conference in the 375th anniversary, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So I thought if 400 years is coming, and I didn't even know that Ghana would, make it a year of return, but I knew that the 400th anniversary would be celebrated everywhere in the world. Why? There is, that mystic Christian thing, that this is a prophecy in the Bible that after 400 years, Joseph, his people will come back and enjoy the fruits of, the labor of. But that's fine. But I knew that the 400th anniversary, even in Virginia, I knew long ago that they were going to celebrate it, and indeed they are going to celebrate it. Let me correct my words. It's not celebration. They are going to commemorate it.
Yes.
Because there's really nothing to celebrate except to commemorate the day and then take stock of what has happened, and then new resolutions for years ahead. Because this 375th anniversary I attended, there were more than 5,000 people, in that ceremony.
Wow.
And I could imagine how the 400th was going to look like.
Well, let's talk a bit about the author. This is your 10th book. You've been writing since the very beginning, and some of your books are recommended reading for anybody who wants to know anything about the history of Ghana, political history, and so forth. The trial of J.J. Rawlings. That book in particular, bearing in mind the era that you were writing about, and your own role in that era, famously fired from the job as editor at the Daily Graphic because of some of the events of the revolution. But recently the president commended you for the work you did, writing that book. I wonder, how did that feel? The former president.
Yes. Yeah. But let's say that there were two regimes. The book is about the action of June 4th, 15th May and June 4th.
Yeah.
And it stopped short at the coming of 31st December. So 31st December is another period. But the important point I'm making is that it was a very significant moment in Ghana's history that we should never forget. See, people sometimes take things out of context and say, oh, but why are you still worrying about June 4th and so on? I still think that it is significant. See, we had Africa that time. We had a series of military takeovers, beginning from Kwame Nkrumah's February 24th. Senior military officers all over the continent. This was the first time junior ranks and junior officers had taken up arms to revolt first against the institution itself and their role in the corrupt practices of the state. And they were challenging it. So it was an internal mutiny. And of course, they had collaborators in civil society. So it was a totally different circumstance. If you read all the historians, Dubois, Henny, and others, they all supported it. It was something that most commentators considered as necessary for Africa. Otherwise, if the senior ranks had continued to run the affairs, coups would continue. We're just making, look at the SMC1, SMC2, where it's like we're just changing chairs, you know. But this shook the Ghana Armed Forces. And I'm sure all other military establishments elsewhere on the continent. It should not be confused with the 31st December that overthrew a constitutional government. And so I think that sometimes we hype issues too much and then confuse the public mind. That was separate. And that's why students, workers, you know, well-meaning people all supported it. When people said let the blood flow, it didn't come from soldiers. It came from civilians, and it was real. And so that phase passed, and it's a historical moment that we cannot wash away. It happened. And again, what were the values that were instituted? That people should be accountable, kalabule, you know, all these, which are signs of the decay of society. Once you get into that and say, oh, we are covered by the Constitution, oh, so we can just exploit as much as we can. Kalabule, if you don't like my kalabule, go to court. You know, it raises a lot of questions. But again, going back to the question you asked, what former president was talking about was the courage in writing the book. But the book was written in 1986.
Yes.
Or published in 86. So what we did was do a reprint of the book. And few people really want to record facts. You see, this is where we all go short. You know, journalists who you happen to be in a period where something is happening. You refuse to document. Later you give excuses for what and what and what. Yeah, so that's what I did. And so that people do not take things out of context. And I have no apologies to anybody. It's important for us to record our history.
Do you see, I mean, the conditions that were prevalent before June 4, the rot, you know, and the inability of the people to do anything about it? Do you see a repetition or a return to any of those conditions in today's Ghana?
It's possible. Not in the sense of maybe the military, you know, intervening. But you see, we've come a long way. And now ordinary people themselves have a means of taking their government to task. It's not only in Ghana, in various parts of Africa the same difficulties. And for me, my understanding of this, what is happening is that we have again taken on a certain political dress, Western democracy, winner takes all. And if you have any questions to ask after 4 years. It's a difficult one for me, although I must say we all voted in the referendum of 1992 that we wanted a multi-party system. But it's a very difficult thing. And so...
You feel perhaps we're not ready for a multi-party system?
I don't think we were ready. You see, a whole lot was going on in terms of pushing us in the direction of improving the economy. And all the statistics, I'm sure, will show that we were doing very well. Of course, there were challenges. But once you have a situation where you have to then stop, we have a new system coming. And every system has people who benefit from the system. Today, everybody is saying Rwanda is doing well, but already there are others who are saying, oh, he's kept too long. You see, so you have a situation where we say, hey, where are we going? One African country coming out of war is showing the world, showing the continent that it can be done. Suddenly people are saying, no, he stayed too long. He's a dictator. He's doing that. So before long, all these labels will cloud whatever he's doing, and then they will organize some people in a multi-party fashion, and then you take away the development going on. But anyway, that's another debate. The point I'm making is that we've reached a stage in Africa where we should take one step back and look at ourselves as a continent. When we do this narrow country thing, it will not help us. Because look at what's going on today. China and America, trade war. We are nothing. We don't belong as little countries. But if this African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement had come into force, which hopefully will come into force in January next year, then Africa will also be strong enough to now go to the table and trade, with these huge countries. If we do that, we'll be stronger.
You think we can? I mean, looking at the different circumstances of many of the states of Africa, and that's, I don't want to call it reluctance, let me call it delay. Delay in unifying as a continent.
Yeah, but you must know our history. In 1963, we had that opportunity. Kwame Nkrumah put it on the table. Cede a little of your self-sovereignty and let us form a continental Union of Africa government.
It didn't happen.
It didn't, because at that time, and as probably of now, France did not allow the French-speaking countries to go into any alliance because their future, their currency, their economy was everything tied to that of France. So they did not allow them to take part. Then there were a few African countries who were also convinced by their masters that Kwame Nkrumah is socialist. He's going to turn all your countries into socialism. He wants to be the leader of Africa. That propaganda worked very well against Nkrumah, and so we didn't have it. So they said, let's go block by block, region by region, ECOWAS region, South African region, Central African region. And that's what has brought us today. So that now African Union is saying, oh, 2063, 100 years after Kwame Nkrumah's dream.
Wow.
100 years is the target before we can have a United States of Africa. But I am convinced that the youth of Africa, if they know themselves, if they know Africa, if they know the history of Africa, they will probably take, you talked about a younger age. Frustration and a whole lot of things will let them go faster than, you know, the leaders of Africa want. I think that they lack information, and that's what we should provide them.
I think you've led me quite neatly to the other thing I wanted to take the opportunity and talk to you about, and that is the work of the media. I mean, if this truth is going to be propagated amongst the young people, then the media has a very big role to play.
Good time.
You have been a major player in the media for your entire career. Currently, you're the founder of the AUCC, which is training young people in the media space. Let me ask you for your honest and professional assessment of today's media in Ghana. How are we doing?
We have a lot of work to do. Some of the work is like mercenary job. Some of the work. But that does not take away a few leading ones that are still, in spite of the challenges, are using the tools at their command to bring awareness to the society. I mean, investigation is not easy, but I know that some media houses and personalities are risking their lives and their career to bring information to the people. See, that's the whole idea, how to get the people informed. So if we in the media do not have the courage to do things that ordinary people cannot do, then who will do it for the country? Yes, I mean, people will criticize because you definitely will step on some people's toes. But I think that the media should be more courageous. We are doing more, you know, excuse me to use the word, civil service journalism. And we have had this for a long time. But
can you explain that, you know, civil service journalism?
Oh, so, no, he said. Just reporting what the government says, without questioning, without analyzing, without investigating. We take every word for what it is. So we just publish what, of course, government will tell you what you want to hear. But you represent the people on the ground. It's not everybody who has access to a media house. So once you have that access to a media house, you are very privileged. Not everybody. Although we talk about social media and so on, the mainstream media is still very important. And even social media quotes mainstream media. So if you have the opportunity to work for the media, then you must also craft a certain roadmap for yourself. What do you want to achieve? Do you want to behave like everybody else? Go to cover a president or a minister and so on, and that is all? Yes, you should cover, but what about the analysis? How does it relate to the development of the country? How does it relate to the economy? How does it relate to Africa? We are here in Ghana, elections in Cote d'Ivoire, and we only receive the news through a French news agency. Even the media houses, few of them dare go out of, outside the borders of Ghana to find information. So we are all part of this whole scheme of keeping us in darkness about ourselves. And when people don't know about themselves, they don't know about themselves. So the media should provide the light. And I'm afraid, apart from a few ones that you can easily, point out, the rest are just sitting there doing, we'll use the word again, civil service journalism, serving the state.
Yeah. At the moment, Joy News is pushing a campaign to defend media freedom. Our analysis is telling us that we are living in a time when media freedom is more at risk than it's been in a very long time. The examples are all around us. There's been the killing of a journalist. There's been the arrest. Some people actually call it kidnapping because they were grabbed, you know, from their workplace. Their equipment was taken with them by the national security. They report that they were tortured and then released and charged with some trumped-up charge that didn't stand the test of time. We've had journalist Manasseh having his life threatened. He had to run from the country. Now he's the only way he can live safely in Ghana is with police escort. We've had police officers beating up journalists, a colleague of ours injured irreparably. These things are happening in today's Ghana. And it's only been over the past few years.
It's a shame.
What's your assessment of the state and its relationship with the media, the fourth estate as we're supposed to be?
I think it is retrogression. Retrogression because people went into the streets and fought against the culture of silence. And for me, history repeats itself. If the state does not act, the people will act. It's a question of time. Because, see, you cannot silence people in this world now, today. If you want to take steps to silence people, you are mistaken. Why don't you become more open? Why don't you become more transparent? Why don't you, put out the news there and let people have, if you don't have anything to hide, come on, open up. But defend yourself when the media criticize or say anything against you. Don't go after them. It's barbaric. It's retrogression. You see, because otherwise, then you realize that there is a deliberate effort to use the state police or state security to stop people, not just the media, to stop people from making their voices heard. And I'm saying that is short-lived. History has shown that that cannot last. One day you will get an uprising and you will not understand why it is coming, but it's coming from some of these things. So I think that it's a sad period in Ghana's media history, but I'm from history. I realize that this is not going to last because there are people that at the end of the day will rise up. Why did we have, there are a lot of politicians who came to power because they were fighting against the culture of silence. History can repeat itself.
The current president is an example.
Sure, it's an example. Professor Dubois Hene was an example. They all stormed into the limelight because of that. What prevents another group of people to do the same? History repeats itself. I mean, you don't, where we were going or where we, freeing the media and allowing people to talk, we should just let it go and allow the state machinery to defend themselves if they have any defense. Why not? I mean, if somebody goes to defame, we have laws. But to stop or to frighten journalists, it's a dangerous, track to follow, in my opinion.
What would your recommendation be? Say the information ministry came to you and said, we want to consult you, we want to figure out how to improve relations between state and the media. What would your recommendation be to the state?
I would, if I were the Minister for Information, I would rather want better relationship, an open and transparent relationship with the media. So I would encourage them to be fearless and then open my doors if I have the information to give them. See, if you are in that ministry, you cannot have all the information. But that's where every unit of government should have a very credible information portfolio. Information that should come from the ministers, from all those who have information to give out to the public. I mean, this occasion thing, Meet the Press, that is so stage managed. It's not effective. Let every ministry be free to provide information when they want to, when they have to. Go to the regions. Some of the regional ministers don't talk because they fear it may counter, the sector ministries and so on. Why should we have that situation? When we have decentralization, when we have more freedoms that people should enjoy, particularly if you campaign on the platform of freedom in development. Please. So I would advise that we should open up and rather, instead of even wanting press to do anything for you, just become transparent. Tell the people what it is. Tell the truth, because they will find it if you tell the lie, So I would recommend a more transparent arrangement.
Recently, the Right to Information Act became law with a postponement clause.
It shows clearly.
Tell me how you feel about that.
Again, it's sad. It shows clearly that the state is not ready. When I say the state machinery is not ready for it. Passing an act just to satisfy concerns is not enough. But why don't we go ahead and be courageous to implement it? Once you've passed it, you have to implement it. Look, you see, we have an audience that is more discerning than we think. That, we can hide certain things from the people for some time, and then later we will know how to play the game. No. These days, it's in your own interest to be open. After all, what does the right of information say? It's giving the media people the opportunity to gather information to feed the people. So why is it difficult? And then people and that will kill all this arrogance in government, where people think, no, you don't have a right to come and interview me. You don't have a right to gather information. Why are you keeping the information? Me, I don't understand. Do you want another government to come later so that we have what went wrong series? Then we start going into, this was there. So why didn't you tell us in the first place? Let's open up the society. If you want to educate more people, it's not only in the classroom, but the media particularly, because every little child, every adult will say, we heard it from radio, from television, from here. So let's empower the media. And if we empower them well, they will do the work of the state, for government or for whoever is in charge of statecraft. So I am very interested in openness. If in those days there was a culture of silence, and we've come very far, we should even at this time be jubilating over the freedoms.
We are currently in a dispensation where our president has a proven track record of defending media freedom. He has defended journalists in court free of charge. He was one of the front fighters for the repealing of the criminal libel law. It goes, there is no doubt that our current president has championed media freedom. Does it come as a shock that in his regime we're having some of these excesses?
Yeah, it's disappointing. It's not shocking, it's disappointing. I think he should demonstrate more openness than what is happening. I'm sure outside observers are saying the same thing. that, oh, here is a president who was a front runner in media freedoms, and he should open the gates. I think the word I can use is disappointing.
Well, Kojo Yankah, this is an honor, and I certainly hope that the effort that you put into writing this book will yield results on the other end in effort from young people to make sure that the principles you're trying to share are lived.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kojo.
Wow.
Come again.
I certainly will.
Well, that was a great conversation there. The great Kojo Yankah.
Yeah. All right. So this is part of our media freedom campaign. Watch out for the people that we speak to, but certainly lessons in there, starting from the history that was shared, and look for his book, From Jamestown to Jamestown, and take a read.